Well, good morning. It is chapter 6 that we're going to be dealing with today. I decided I want to deal with each chapter separately in a video. There may be one or two exceptions of that where you have some chapters together due at the same time, but I think it'll make it simpler for you to do your assignments because they're due on different days. So today we're going to be dealing with chapter 6, which is the nominative and accusative cases of the noun, and then the definite article. This is a very long chapter. Again, not quite as long as chapter 5, but it is a long chapter. And it is also very important. It's dealing with first and second declension nouns, and we'll talk about what that is. And I just want to go through the book in a very simple, straightforward way, try to anticipate things that I recognize as very important and sometimes maybe a little difficult just to call your attention to them. But the primary thing in doing this is going to be just go day by day and hour by hour as you make this preparation through these chapters. I want to remind you that in every chapter, or at least most of the chapters, there's an exegetical insight. I think you'll find these interesting. It's very likely that you won't agree with everything you read, but I think you will find them to be very helpful in motivation to use the Greek. Also remember there's an overview. I encourage you to take the time to read through that so you can kind of get in your mind what you're going to be looking toward in this particular chapter. He also deals with English grammar, reminding you of that, not in this chapter because he did that all in chapter 5, but in several chapters. And then he begins to focus on the Greek. And again, I say, make sure that you're reading this. Make sure you understand it. If there are questions, please go to the discussion board and post those questions, and I certainly will respond when I have the opportunity, as will other students. Now, I want to remind you, as he does in section 6.3, that this is not the time at this moment to memorize. So when you're reading through this, don't worry about memorizing. Just read it, see the illustrations that he's using, because he's doing some preliminary work here. He's talking about several things that are important. Case endings. We've talked about Greek being a highly inflected language, which means that there are many forms. The forms change in different situations, and so you want to read very carefully what he says. The case, remember, determines the function of indicates the function of the word. And so you want to pay very close attention to that because it is very important in nouns. He also talks about the stem of the noun, and it is important that you learn this. He's going to give you some tips along the way as you read about doing that. But the primary way to recognize the stem is simply to remove the ending of the lexical form of the verb. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But you remove the ending of the lexical form of the verb. Like in the word logos, the final letter, the final sigma, is the ending of that lexical form. And so the stem is going to be laga, lambda, omicron, gamma, omicron. So you'll see that in section 6.4. Gender is also indicated in the declension, and so most of the time, there are some exceptions to this. There's a few first declension nouns that are masculine rather than feminine. Most of them, though, are going to be feminine, and there are also some exceptions in others. But if you just read carefully what he says, gender, of course, is going to be either masculine, feminine, or neuter. And then the number is going to be whether you're talking about one person or more than one person. And that is also indicated by the endings. When we get to the paradigms and you learn those paradigms, there's really only just a few of those that you need to memorize, and then you'll want to keep those in your notebook so that you can keep referring back to them. In section 6-7, he talks about declension. I've already talked about that, but read that carefully, what he's saying. And then he starts in 6-8 dealing with the first two cases, and those cases are the nominative case, which is the naming case, or generally the subject, and we'll see later on can also be the predicate nominative when you use a connecting verb in the sentence. So that's one, the nominative, which is usually the subject, and then the accusative case, which is generally the direct object. Just if you remember that from your English grammar. Be sure to note section 6:10, where he talks about word order. Word order in English is important because the subject usually precedes the verb. That is not the case in Greek. Word order is useful and is meaningful in Greek, but it does not have anything to do with subject and verb situations. It is the declension, the case endings, and so forth that indicate that, and you will see that in the examples that he uses, particularly in 6:10. He shows you several different word orders, and as you read that over, you can understand what he is talking about. So pay close attention to that, and we'll talk about that some more later on as well. Then he mentions in 6:11 lexicons and lexical form, and so read that carefully. Lexicons are simply dictionaries, and lexical form is going to be the form of the word, the Greek word, that appears in the lexicon. You need to know that. Generally, with the nouns, it's going to be the nominative singular form, and of course we'll learn the lexical form of verbs a little bit later on. On page 32 is a halftime review. That's very helpful. It gives you a chance to take a short break and then go back and take a look if you need to review. We begin case endings on page 32 in section 6:12, and if you will read and learn those, what I would do is cut those out. You're going to see something later on that may help you in your notebook as well. I'll call that to your attention when we get to it. But what you need to do is learn those single letters, sigma, nu, iota, and upsilon, sigma. So for the masculine, same for the feminine and neuter. But learn those because those are the endings that you're going to add for the nominative and accusative cases in the nouns that we're dealing with right now. On the top of the next page, you have an example of those endings attached to the final vowel of the first and second declension nouns. Now that's the way I learned them, so I'll probably refer to them that way. But since you're beginning in Greek, I'd say go ahead and learn it in the manner that he talks about, because that'll make it probably make it easier for you as you follow through the grammar. Now there is a section right above section 13 that he labels important, and I would certainly say pay very close attention to that, as well as any place he gives you hints, as he does in 6:13. So read that if you will. He moves on down 6:14, the paradigm, putting the word with the case endings. Now, that's just building on it. It's inductive learning, and I think you'll find that very helpful. He talks about the feminine nouns and some of the exceptions that are there in 6:15. Read that carefully. He talks about parsing. We will talk about that more in our first class, and so just look forward to getting that down at that point. I'll also talk about it a little bit in the exercises when we talk about those in a few minutes. Then he begins to list some noun rules. There are, I think, 8 of those. I'll show you where they are in the back of the book. You can copy them and put them in your notebook, and it'll be helpful to you. But his suggestion is that you learn these nouns rather than memorizing a lot of paradigms, and I think that is a very good point. Then we come to the definite article. Now, I want to mention the definite article here. You read through this, listen to what he's saying, but the definite article is very, very important in recognizing nouns. If the article appears with the noun, it's going to agree with the noun in case, number, and gender, so that's going to identify the noun for you. So if you learn that article and keep that article firmly in your mind, both in all 3, masculine, feminine, and neuter forms, it will help you a great deal in what you're doing. So we'll come back to the article when I show you in a few minutes the complete paradigm, and I'm going to suggest that you do memorize that. In fact, I'm asking you to learn that for the quiz that's going to be coming up, and so we will do that. For this chapter, we may have to end up doing 2 videos, maybe not. I think we're going to move on over to the summary and then the vocabulary, talk about the exercises for just a moment, and then we will try to get it posted for you. Look at the vocabulary, if you will, in your book on page 39. Let me go through and read carefully what he's saying about how these words are listed, because that will make a difference. But also the pronunciation is what we want to focus on right now. Let me say them very quickly for you. The first word is agape, and then alas, autas, basileia, de. That's that post-positive that he mentions. Be sure to read what he says about that. In, the preposition. Ergon, kairos, noon, ha, he, ta. That's the article. You'll want to learn all of those forms. Hadi, and then u, which sometimes appears ook or ook with the kai, and then the word ora, which means hour. Now, those are the vocabulary words that you need to learn for this particular chapter.